Welcome to Jung at Harp. This is episode number 167, How to Love What You Do and Do What You Love. This is
The love
Valentine's Day.
episode, sorry, the love episode because it's Valentine's Day.
Yes. And the
Okay,
love
now I just
episode is being announced by Deborah Henson-Conant, who is a creative, a composer, a mentor, a coach, a teacher, an extraordinary performer, and overall fantastic human being. And I'm Kathleen Wiley, a
Ooh, I
Jungian
love myself
psychoanalyst.
now.
It's the love day.
Right. Well, after
I'm
that
Kathleen Wiley.
introduction, I actually love myself. Go on. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. Go on.
Well, in that case, you want to go back and watch it. When you need a
Right.
boost, you need to watch this introduction. Um, and I'm a psychoanalyst in North Carolina, and we both play the harp, and that's why we call this Jung at Harp. So we've already told you why we're going to talk about this today because it's Valentine's Day. And so I'm going to start with my working definition of love. My working definition of love is compassionate presence.
Mm. Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that's my working definition of
Okay,
love.
well, I'm fascinated that you have a working definition of love. I don't. And maybe that's where I'm having trouble on the dating sites. But I also want to say that this is a conversation. So unlike other podcasts where we're here to tell you, one of the things that drew Kathleen and me together was enjoying our conversation and realizing how much we both love the art or the experience of conversation and where it takes us and how it takes us to places in each other and ourselves that we didn't know were there. So so we come with a question rather than we're going to tell you about something. We're going to model for ourselves and for you the action or the inquiry or the art or whatever you want to call it of conversation and what happens when you have a conversation of inquiry, of looking into something. And that means that we invite you into this inquiry as well. And that's why we're on this particular platform, because it allows us to be reaching out to different places. You may be on YouTube, you may be on LinkedIn, you may be on Facebook. And yet, on some of those, you can actually chat with us and then you become part of the conversation. So we invite you into that. So let's go back, and I wanna also remember that, what Jung at Harp is all about is that intersection of where, art meets, our spiritual connection meets and I should go back and look at what it is, but I think part of what I'm hearing over and over and over again in what I just said is 2 things coming together in inquiry, in exploration, without necessarily having an intention of what the other should do, but coming together with the intention of inquiry and exploration and discovery together. So I guess I would say a definition of love I might have right now, and I see why I'm having this definition of love right now, is is an is discovery of ourselves and the other together. Now, I don't know how that plays out in, for example, I'm wearing one of my favorite shirts today, which is probably 30 years old. Now, I don't know what this shirt is discovering about me, so I don't know that if it's a mutual discovery, but I know that I love it. Now, that I don't, that doesn't make any sense. So why do I love a shirt? I mean, do I?
Well, the reason I started with my working definition of love is I think when we start using the word love, it conjures up a lot of different things, meanings, experiences, sensations, some positive, some negative for people. And if we go to a more spiritual, kind of psychological, psycho-spiritual perspective, love is probably undefinable. I mean, if we look at that, famous text from St. Paul in First Corinthians, by the time you get to the end of the chapter, it's like, okay, but still, what is love? We know it's not clanging like cymbals, you know, we know it's so I think that part of what we have to and I think this is true not just for the idea of love, but for a lot of things. I think we have to start by saying, okay, what does that mean for me? I want to go ahead
Mm.
and bring in here one of my favorite books, which is The Art of Loving by Eric Fromm. And I love that book. And it's one of the books, in fact, my husband and I, sometimes when we're going on road trips, we'll take it and we'll read to each other from it. We've read it many times. It's just, and he talks about the idea of love being this numinous experience that we can't make happen. And I think I would agree with that in the sense of when we think about love between two people or love of a shirt or love of the heart. It's just something, it's an energy that's there. But what Fromm says is that we can't make love happen, but we can cultivate the art of loving.
Mm.
And
Mm.
for me, that's so important for our topic today is how do we cultivate. And part of what he says is that the art of loving means cultivating giving, care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. So to your point that when you love something, it's a process of discovery, that there is a desire to know. You want knowledge of the other. Like when we play our harps, we want knowledge of what does it sound like when, my finger plucks the string with that much pad or with that little pad or that quickly. We want knowledge. And so I think there is a inherent in how do we cultivate love. I think it's having a respect that cares enough to want knowledge of the other. You know?
That's really interesting because as I'm listening to this, I'm wondering if I'm just like super egotistical, because I'm often wanting knowledge of myself. And in a great conversation,
Mm-hmm.
I will discover more about myself as well. It's really interesting. I'm thinking about, yeah. Well, I'm thinking about a conversation I had yesterday, off of a dating site, and this person just kept telling me what they're like and what they're like and what they're like and they're like, and I just, uh, after a while, I just thought, well, there's no discovery here. I'm not learning what you're like. You're telling me what you're like, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
learning anything. And I don't. I I don't, it's not a conversation. I don't know, I don't know what to do to make it be a conversation. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how. I mean, maybe I could have asked some questions, but I also wanted to see, like, can this conversation move without me asking questions? I mean, I did ask some. So, and so it was interesting. It was interesting to learn about somebody, like, if you're on a road trip and you meet somebody and who's a stamp collector. I mean, it's really fascinating to find out, what do you love
Mm-hmm.
about stamps? And, and so you come away and you love stamps in a new way and you see stamps in a new way, and that's really great. But it's not, a love that has a self-generating, um something that creates a lifetime of love. Which it's really interesting because 'cause I'm thinking about, like, my brother right now. I absolutely adore my brother, and
Mm-hmm.
we're not speaking, um, and but I know that we will, and, um, and and part of the beauty of that relationship, and this is, like, the first time I think this has ever happened, unless I missed it, for a couple years sometime, which I do. There's people who weren't speaking to me for a while, and I didn't notice, but that's another thing. Um, but but I just realized that, that the relationship is, it is developing, maybe slowly in some way, but it's interesting versus, I mean, I'll be fascinated meeting somebody who does something or who believes in something I don't believe in, and I might ask them, "Tell me why you believe in that. Why do you," and I will learn, and it's interesting, but it's different than the development of love. For example, I did not love the harp.
Mm-hmm.
I did not come to the harp because I loved it. I was very interested in it, and I was fascinated. I loved the mechanism of it. I loved how it was built. I loved that it, don't get me started on how it mirrors the tonal harmony. And so, I mean, there's all kinds of things intellectually I found fascinating about it as a mechanical thing. But I didn't fall in love with it until, 40 years into the journey when I realized what it had made possible for me, what it
Mm,
makes possible for me in terms of my own self-expression and my
mhm.
own discovery and experience of life. So now I'm going to say that love for this moment is it's something about the experience of life, being able to s loving something gives you a greater experience of life. I mean, even my brother, if we're fighting or something, it gives me a greater experience of life
Well, love
because I
bonds.
love him so much.
Yeah, love is a
Mhm,
bond. It's an energetic connection. Whether it's an energetic
mhm,
connection with one's ego consciousness and one's larger self, or it's an energetic connection between me and you, or you and your brother, or you and the heart. So there is an
mhm.
energetic connection, which is part of my
Mm.
working definition of compassionate presence. You know, that
Uh-huh.
when you show up with passion and you are present, then you make room for the other, but you also make room for yourself. It's not one or the other, it's both and. And I think it sounds like maybe what you were experiencing with this phone call yesterday is there wasn't room for you. It wasn't about both and. It didn't feel like.
Right, as you were speaking, you said something about alone, and I thought, "Right, not alone." There is
Mm-hmm.
something about experiencing
Right.
not alone.
Right.
You also said compassion, and as absurd as it may sound, I had never really thought about the relationship between being passionate and being compassionate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think about passion as our deepest desires, which means that for me, the true passions are connected to our deepest desires, which is our deepest fire, the source of our own being. And so, when we have that passion, that fire, and we're present with it, I have to have a fire for mitigating, being with someone in a way that mitigates their suffering, or that shows them a way forward on the harp, or that says, hey, I value you and I want to hear what you have to say. So I think that the compassion for me always taps into one's deepest essence. It's with passion. Compassion is not empty. If someone truly has compassion, there's something substantive there. There's some fire that motivates an action. Maybe the action, again, is the attitude one conveys, but there's something that there's energy. It's alive. It's not static.
So now I wrote down not empty. So a minute ago you were speaking and I wrote
Mm-hmm.
alone, not alone, and then I wrote empty, not empty. And as you were speaking, I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking of that amazing experience when I mean, it can be as simple as, there's a pocket that you think is empty and then you find something in it. I mean, that's just in its simplest
Mm-hmm.
form, but in its other most expansive form, I think it's like any great relationship. You keep finding and you keep finding, or the magic of, there's an empty box and then there's something in it, or you open it up and you realize what's in it is I wrote this story about this dog, Gloria, and she finds an empty bag, and the bag seems to be following her. And so she brings it home and she says to her dad, I found this bag and it followed me home and I want to keep it as a pet. And her dad is like, okay, I don't know, you want a bag for a pet, fine. And so, but they do all this stuff together in the bag, carry stuff for her, and she wears it on her head and everything like that. And then one day they're sitting at the piano and, the father is playing, and they're playing piano whatever, 4 paws, and they're singing. And suddenly the bag starts singing and they realize that the bag isn't empty at all. It has this voice and the
Mm-hmm.
voice can sing. So I guess it's that magic and of ourselves as well, that we think that something isn't there, or we think we don't have a connection, and then one day we realize we do. And I know that that's also what it's like when you sort of one moment you realize that you're in love with somebody, you're next to them and you don't realize that you're in love
Mm-hmm.
with them, and then you are. Wow, what
Mm-hmm.
happened? I mean, what happened?
John Lennon's tune, Nothing's Gonna Change My
Uh-huh.
World, is going through my head. John was learning that this week to teach a student. So I heard it multiple times. John Lennon wrote that song when the Beatles were into transcendental meditation.
Mhm.
And so the nothing that's going to change my world is the everything
Oh, uh-huh.
that is the great mystery. And so I think that what you're talking about is that we're getting really esoteric here, but there's an emptiness that is the no thing, that is everything, that is the source of all. And so
Wow.
that it is out of that no thing that is the source of all that those moments of realization of love, as you're talking about it, whether it's love for another person or love for the heart, happen. They merge. It's as if it's magic. Um,
Well, I'm
but it is.
go
Yeah.
on.
Go ahead.
Well, it may as you were
But and for me, I love the term
uh,
magic. I think magic is got so much more juice than it's a psychological principle or something.
well, as you were talking, as you were talking, I was thinking about this conversation that I was having yesterday, in which I would say there was no nothing. That this person kept imposing, this is who I am, this is who I am, this is who I am, this is how I am. And so there was no nothing to explore. And you're reminding me of a book I did read recently, like The Zen of Nothing, or What's on the Other Side of Nothing, The Other Side of Nothing, something like that, that I was really, really
Hmm.
attracted to. Okay, so we've so along in this, there's something in this. A few minutes ago, I was thinking about, you were talking about something, and I was thinking about your book, and I was thinking about how
Hmm.
you've been on the road, you got ill, and then you were on the road, and getting back to your book, getting back to that connection to your book. And I was thinking that somehow there was something in here as well
Hmm.
about love, being able to connect to this, and connect and reconnect and reconnect. Is there something you could, like, so the
Yeah, because I
process?
think that.
Yeah. I think we've got some
Go
kind of
ahead.
delay between us, and I think there's a delay between us, and it's having us interrupt each other. But I was also think I just want to say that I was listening to us and I heard some glitches, and I was like, "Hey, you know what? This is really cool. In this world in which everything can be perfected so easily, how cool is this that every glitch is going to be here in this conversation?" So, anyway, take it away.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking about the fire, and again, the finding that, not finding, but reconnecting with the fire. The desire, this book project I've been working on, which seems like forever, which probably has been forever on some level, that when I can tap back into the desire, the passion around why I started it, what I want to offer in it,
Mm.
and how it juices me working with the ideas and the concepts and the stories, that's then when the energy begins to gather. We might just use the image of alchemical fire. The fire starts to get bigger to warm me up and get me moving. So then I focus, I set aside the mark off the time. The energy is there to do it, as opposed to imposing it from the head down, which is a very non-fiery process. I mean, the intellect is always associated with air. It's always up here flying around. Well, that's fine flying around, but if I'm trying to motivate my whole being, my body, mind, my all of my faculties to focus on writing the book or playing my harp, then that requires something that's much more substantive. Fire is substantive, you know, and it warms you up. It gets things moving in a way that is grounded, you know.
So,
So,
as you were saying that, I was thinking, I see. So fire is air in action. I mean, I get that it's not, I mean, there's a lot of ways that air gets in action.
yeah.
So
Well, and
fire is
alchemically, the symbols are similar for air and fire.
okay. Okay. So, all right. So let's come back to this question. So we were talking about your book, and as you were talking about your book, I was thinking, so that's really interesting. So when I've written certain things, like I can think of 3 things that I've written, big pieces, that I started off with a title or a concept that was simply absurd. That was, I mean,
Mhm.
for example, the head of there's an organization called Annals of Improbable Research, which is like a spoof on science, or anyway, the science of the spoof on science, whatever. Anyway, so the head of that, Mark Abrams, handed me a pamphlet one day and said, here's a pamphlet. It's called Stress Analysis of a Strapless Evening Gown. Why don't you write a piece about this? And so I was like, okay. And I took it and I looked at it and I just looked through it and I looked for the words that jumped out at me. And then I looked for the technical scientific definitions of those words. And in every case, the words were, I ended up writing this 5-movement piece called Stress Analysis of a Strapless Evening Gown. And each movement was about a different concept. And I can't remember the names of all the movements, but the middle movement was called the Danger Zone, which is now this, piece that was, I filmed and stuff. But the final one is just an example. There was one called contraction and something, I can't remember what it was. But the final one was curve, the word curve that was in the book. And I looked it up and I discovered that the definition, the numeric, whatever, the mathematical definition of a curve is the locus of a point with 1 degree of freedom. And how 1 degree of freedom creates a curve. Otherwise, it's a line. And so I ended up writing a poem about it, like, and I can't remember the whole poem, but something, but so when you feel constrained as if though you cannot bend or turn, remember there's a lesson from the curve that we can learn with one, something, uh, something with a swerve or something, with 1 degree of freedom, a line
Mhm.
becomes a curve. Now, I might have that wrong. It might be a point becomes a curve, or I don't know what it is. But what happened, and this happened over and over, in every time I took an absurd principle or idea, it became profound. I
Mhm.
discovered I didn't discover it. It somehow revealed itself to me, that profound nature. The next time I noticed this was when I wrote a piece. I just wanted to write a series of pieces where it would make sense for the main character. They were theater pieces, theater music pieces, solo music theater. It would make sense for the main character to be wearing a harp. That's all that mattered. So I wrote
Mhm.
3 pieces. The first was In the Waiting Room for Heaven. The second one was called, and the third was called Electra's Lyre. I knew nothing about what these titles meant. They're just silly titles in which I thought, well, where would somebody be wearing a harp? All right, In the Waiting Room for Heaven. Okay, what's the story of Shrunk the Harp? What would that be like? And Electra's Lyre. Well, I just like the term. Ugh, what does it mean? And in each case, by writing the piece, the, they became these deep, profound, meaningful pieces that had
Mhm.
that had a meaning. So okay, so why am I saying this? Because my experience is that that was me experiencing love. Love may start out as just like, oh, that's interesting, and then
Mhm.
as it reveals itself, it becomes love. It's something about, like, even my relationship with the harp, or my relationship with a chord sequence. I mean, I might find a chord sequence that I might find a chord that I maybe I love it immediately. And but there it is. It's just a chord sequence. But then how does it become something in which I can express something with it? and why do I love it, and what is it? And I mean, and then that becomes a, I'm having trouble with my fingers this morning, but I mean, so it becomes something that allows me to explore, and then I can explore, and then I can. So talk to me about this, Kathleen. This process must happen when people fall in love with each other.
Well, now we're going to get into a totally different aspect, which is when people fall in love, it's an archetypal possession. We don't want to go there
Oh,
today.
whoa,
We
whoa,
could
whoa!
go there
Wait,
another
wait,
time.
wait, wait! You mean this is an archetypal possession, and I just fell in love with it? No, what?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're talking about again, we're love. That word has so many different meanings.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are talking about love as this sudden, instantaneous bond and often idealization of the other, this is why people fall in love and they fall out of love. There's so much projection involved in falling in love because you only see that which you want to see and what fits the lens through which you're looking unconsciously. And then you fall out of love when the reality, the fuller reality of the person shows up. That's not love in the sense we're talking about.
I'm missing you. I don't know if it's me or if it's everybody. My connection has lost you for a minute. Did others hear that? If you can text, if chat, please let us know, because you were just saying something so fascinating. You were talking about how, okay, other people meet, they fall in love, and then go on. What you just
Yeah,
said.
what I was saying is that in terms of when people fall in love, there's so much projection onto the other person. There's just an experiencing of one aspect of that person because you're experiencing through your lens. And when those projections fall off, that's when people fall out of love. So that's a totally different phenomena than we're talking about love that is a bond that holds and love that's cultivated through giving and caring and being responsible and respecting. When you go to the harp and you love a progression, you are investing a lot of yourself in engaging with it. You're listening, shaping what you're doing according to harp is responding. There's a lot of interplay. That's very different than falling in love, you know,
Right.
where the idealization will wear off.
Whoop,
Oh, I'm seeing balloons
me
behind me.
too.
That's weird.
Interesting. Okay,
Okay.
nice. And Victoria, thanks for letting us know that you can hear. So part of what I just
Yeah.
heard from you is that when we quote fall in love, we kind of like, here's the big package and it's all amazing and wonderful. And all there is to do is for it to, if all there is to discover is that you were wrong. I mean, really. But when you start with, I don't know, an instrument like I did, then instruments is like, oh, okay, well, whatever, here it is. I'm not crazy about the sound, but I like how this does. And then you spend a lifetime, you start to discover what there is to love.
And your fire, if we
Ah,
go back to compassionate presence with passion, when you keep approaching it with passion over and over again and being present with your own passion, whether it's passion for creating something, passioning for expressing, then that
well, what
bonds.
I'm here, yeah, what I'm
That
hearing
bond.
is that if you come to a thing with your passion, it, you allow it to expand in a new way.
Well, your experience
I
of it
see.
expands.
Right.
Whether it expands or not, again, I
Ah,
tend to think we do expand in relationship to one another. But again, that's kind of a more
yeah.
technical conversation. But your experience of it expands. Your experience of the harp has
Right.
expanded. And it's experience that's key here, not your intellectual understanding. You may have gained a lot of
Right.
knowledge of the harp, but it's an
Right.
experiential
It's
knowledge.
shown me, I mean, what I've realized that it is brought out another side of me that I wasn't able to express. at the same time as I
Mm-hmm.
brought to it, what I did want to express. And I want to bring up what Victoria's saying, and I also
Right.
want to say that one of the things
Right.
that I do in the academy, because we're, everybody's, here's hundreds of harpists together looking at each other's work, and it's very and we're taught to be critical and to assess everything that we do and that other people are doing. We're taught that that's how we observe each other, and yet it's really important to get rid of that perfectionism in order to be able to be creative. And so part of what happens in the live part of the academy is addressing perfectionism and addressing that assessment so that we have a way out of it. And one of the easiest ways out of it, if you're either judging yourself or judging somebody else, or you look at somebody else's work and you're like, well, I thought it was better before, or like, I wish you'd do this, or I'm not that good, or any of that. The minute your brain starts doing that, you're into this external world that doesn't allow love. And the
Mm-hmm.
easiest way out, the easiest way into love and out of that realm, which doesn't really let you connect, is to just find something to love. Find something, find anything, it doesn't matter. It just takes you into this new realm. And I don't think it's like a goody two shoes or anything. It's a way out of that mindset.
Yeah, and what I would say is to find something to love, find something that stokes your fire. Find something that resonates for you. Find something that speaks to you. Because
Mm,
to me,
mm,
when we love, because there's some, it resonates with us. Resonance puts us in touch with something that's dark, we don't like in ourselves, but we
mm,
love it because it helps us know ourselves more fully.
mm.
So I think that to find something that you love, look for that which stokes your fire, what inspires you, what gives you some sense of connection to yourself, that allows you more access to
Mm.
all of your energies.
I love that. We're going to pull up Victoria. Esther Pearl said most people will have multiple marriages in their
Yeah.
lifetime. The question is whether we get to do it with the same person. I thought it was brilliant. We all change and evolve, and true partners evolve together and with each other. Well,
Yes.
that's making me think of the harp, because I do remember that. I mean, I was fascinated by the harp, and I was really I was fascinated also by how it could help me stop being me. That's what I had at first. It could help me be a real musician and not the fake weird. I didn't know how to what
Mhm.
incapable. And like my proudest day was when I was wearing a black outfit and I looked like everyone else, and I was carrying a little container that had my huge tuner, and I just remember being, I'm a real musician. And like, but shortly after, it became a trap and a cage
Mhm.
that I wanted to I that I just couldn't be self-expressed. And I remember going to my teacher, Tony, who was not a harpist. He was a mime, his work is called physical eloquence. And I remember taking the harp to him and just sticking it in the middle of the room and saying, like, get me out of this prison. How do I get out of this prison? And
Mhm.
through his exploration and the way he explored it, um, I was able to discover the relationship that I wanted to have with it, the physical relationship that I wanted to have with it. And I was able to start having a much more physicalized engagement. And then eventually that
Mhm.
actually led to the development of a new harp together with Kamak harps, so that I could have the full physical expression that was going to let me
Mhm.
out of that. So why am I saying this? Oh, I was saying it in basing on what Victoria first said, which was that I got to have multiple marriages. I had a marriage at first in which it helped me get focus out of this life that I didn't understand who I was as an artist. So it trapped me. It gave me the trap I needed, and then it allowed me to get out of that trap. And then it allowed me to actually create a community to help other people get out of that trap. And I hadn't thought about it as those multiple marriages. I will pull up
Right. Right.
the and Monica says, for me, one of the wonders
Yeah.
in love is that there is no critical assessment in this moment. And
Yeah.
and to me, when I read that, I think, oh, that's a description of freedom. To,
Mm-hmm.
to actually be in the moment, no critical assessment,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
both surrender and complete.
And I want to,
Go on, yeah.
yeah, and I just want to say, and no critical assessment is replaced by discernment and differentiation. Because to really love someone also means that you can be okay with the things that drive you up the wall at times. To really love someone is not a Pollyanna-ish, they're perfect like they are, in the sense of whatever perfect means, but it means that we love them because this is who they are. And so, yeah, they have this foible, just like I have my foibles. Um, that, that, and I think this is back to your fun one. Look for the differentiated nuances of what speaks to you.
Mm.
And, so even if there's a dissonant chord that you would not play, what is it that
Mhm,
dissonant chord might
mhm,
evoke in you that you value? So again,
mhm,
I just want to put that out there, that there's
mm.
differentiation and just believe the gift of redeemed judgment and criticality. you know.
I would love to do a show on that. I wanna pull up one more, but when you
Yeah.
as you were talking just now, as you were seriously, like, I wanna put a pin in that. As you were talking just now, I was going back to something you said before about resonance, and, and what I got was finding something to love is also finding that resonance, which means that you're kind of gonna open a resonance chamber in yourself.
Right.
Uh so Victoria says, I agree. We need to know what to improve,
Right.
but it is equally important to nurture
Yeah.
what we love.
Yes.
My math is not good and I don't love it. No amount of tutoring is going to make me an accountant. I enjoy music though, and I feel motivated to expand uh, what I could do
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's really interesting. I have such mixed feelings whenever I hear people talk about improvement because in the academy, I find, in Hip Harp Academy, I find that so many people are so focused on what they can't
Mm-hmm.
do, and yet often don't engage in the practices, and I'm talking about me too. I observe myself obsessed with what I can't do and what I should be able to do and what I see somebody else able to do. And yet, I will not take that time to actually, you know, take it on as a practice to do the thing that I can do over and over again with the trust that it will expand into that thing. It improves itself. It makes space to improve itself.
Yeah.
But I
I
want to go
think,
back. I got obsessed by that. So let me go back.
yeah, but I think you're bringing us
So
kind of
you're so but I think yeah.
I think you're bringing us full circle back to our topic, because I know we're going to have to stop here in a minute, of how to love what you do and do what you love. And I think Victoria's comment takes us to that we nurture what we love. How do we do what we love and love what do what we love and love what we do, is we nurture that which has that
Mhm.
resonance for us. We listen to that which touches us deeply. I sometimes have the experience when I'm playing a song and I'm really into it, and I'll hear a phrase, and it's so beautiful. It's not a good thing to do if you're playing for other people, but I stop because I just want to be with the beauty of the moment. I love it. I don't want to go on. I want to stay there with it. And so I think that, you know, if we allow ourselves to notice what has that effect on us, and do more of that and linger with it. Linger with it.
Well, yeah, I
Because
would
that's
say,
what will,
I mean,
yeah. Go
I
ahead.
was thinking, wow, what if you repeated it? What if when you got to that moment, you repeated it?
Yes.
How and what that would open. So, so to wrap up, um, I'm getting this is Valentine's Day, and I'm getting, first of all, to, I didn't get to do my Valentine's yesterday because some other thing happened. So it's like, get those Valentines out, because my video
Mhm.
Valentines, because it is that opportunity to just make that connection. And to find, and as I'm doing it, to find what I just to enjoy the love that I have for each person
Yes.
and for who they are, and to have a practice in which I get to feel
Right.
that and to be resonant by it and to enjoy it, and then just get to be who I am for the rest of the day in
Mhm.
that love of them, and to wear things that I love while
Mhm.
I'm doing it.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah. So one of the things I'm recommitting to do, I've been lately just playing with improvising on a progression of going, starting in Mixolydian, going to Dorian, then Aeolian, then back to Ionian. And I'm going to let myself do that at least 10 minutes every day for the next week. Because it's one
Mm.
of those things that when I do it, I just allow myself to be present with the harp and listen more deeply in a way. And I don't get caught up in trying to learn this
Mm.
piece or trying to get that just technically right or whatever it is. So I'm going to nurture what I love. And that's part of what I love.
I'm hearing you're taking on a practice of engaging in something
Yes.
you love with the
Yeah.
instrument, with something. And so I wanna jump in that too and take on, playing the pieces that, in which I am expressing a desire for love, whether I know it or not. So I
Yes.
wanna be within that, and I commit to doing that for at least 10 minutes a day, hopefully more. And then we can
Mhm.
say what we experienced when we got here next week.
That's right. We can talk about
Okay,
that
well,
next week.
so thank you, Monica and Victoria, and who've been part of this conversation, and everybody else who was here and wasn't able to get on and speak with us, and the people who send us notes afterwards. Thank you so much to be part of this journey. And Kathleen, thank you.
Mm,
We're working on putting this into podcast form. We are actively working on that now. So I am looking forward to more people being able to hear this,
mhm.
be part of this conversation. Thank you. And I will see you. Yes. Okay. We'll see you all next week.